Tips and tricks to reading Chinese characters. The Chinese writing system, which we know as Chinese characters or hànzì, is one of the oldest writing systems in the world which is still used to this day. Hànzì is a type of logographic writing system. This writing system uses symbols called logograms to represent single words or morphemes. Chinese characters specifically evolved from either pictograms, visual depictions of objects, or signs that reflect concepts by association. This is why you have some characters that often look like the words they mean. For example, shan, which means mountain, looks like 3 mountains. Did you know? People use about 2,000 to 3,000 characters just for everyday use communication. In total, the language is estimated to have over 100,000 characters. Most Chinese characters can be divided into 2 character components, the radical, 部首, or the main characters. Radicals are one component that make up certain compound characters. They are used to categorize characters in the Chinese dictionary. At times, they are also associated to the semantic meaning of the whole character. The main characters often serve as the main component of the compounded characters. This main component often determines the pronunciation of the whole character. It can often represent the phonological root. Here is your first tip. Knowing what each radical is associated to can go a long way in helping you learn the characters. It can also help with making an educated guess on the meaning of the new words you learn. Here is an introduction to some common radicals and the meanings they are associated to. The first radical is called 单人旁. It is associated to the character 人, which means person. This means that oftentimes the character with this radical has something to do with people. The next radical is called 三点水. It's associated to the character 水, which means water. This means that most of the characters with this radical have something to do with water. The third radical on the bottom is called 反犬旁. It is associated with the character 犬, which means dog. So a lot of the characters with this radical have something to do with dogs or animals. The next radical at the top is called 草字头. It is derived from the character 草, which means grass. So a lot of the characters with this radical would have something to do with grass or vegetation. The radical below is called 走之旁. It is derived from the character 走, which means to run. So a lot of the characters with this radical have something to do with running or athletics. The last radical below is called 竖心旁. It is derived from the character 心, which means heart. So a lot of the characters with this radical would have something to do with your heart or your feelings. Here is the second tip you can use. Knowing the main character component can oftentimes help you figure out the exact or relative pronunciation of the character overall. However, they will still be varying in tone. For example, in this first character, the common phonological root is 美. Below, you can see that these 3 characters all have the same pronunciation. 美, the first meaning plum, the second meaning berry, and the third meaning mold. So if you knew the pronunciation of the main root character, you could have made a pretty good guess for how to pronounce the 3 characters below. Make sure to keep in mind, however, that the main root character is pronounced 美 with 第三声. However, the bottom 3 characters are pronounced 美 with 第二声. Here we have a different example. This common phonological root being 亲 with 第一声. Below, the first character on the left is pronounced 请 with 第三声, which means to invite. The middle character being pronounced 晴 with 第二声, which means clear weather. Lastly, on the right, the character is also pronounced 情 with 第二声, which means feelings. Once again, keep in mind that all these characters have a similar pronunciation. 清, but they all have different tones. For our last example, we have the common phonological root fang. The first character on the left is pronounced fang with 第一声, which means fragrant. In the middle, the character is pronounced fang with 第二声, which means to protect. And lastly, on the right, and finally, the character on the right is pronounced fang with 第四声, which means to place. Like and subscribe to watch more videos like this with us at Toronto Chinese Academy.